Humanity's greatest allies had fallen, entire star systems wiped out in a relentless wave of destruction by the Vrex, an alien species unlike anything Earth had encountered. Their warships, sleek and deadly, cut through fleets like a scythe through wheat, their armies decimating planets with ruthless efficiency. The Vrex were more than conquerors, they were harbingers of extinction. Earth's last line of defense was rapidly crumbling, and humanity was no longer able to stand alone. The Federation, a collection of worlds once united under a banner of peace, was shattered. The Vrex had left nothing in their wake except a galaxy stained in blood. Only Earth remained a beacon of hope, and that was fading fast. General Rain Carter stood at the window of the Earth Command Center, staring at the expanse of stars beyond. The view of the galaxy had once been a symbol of endless possibilities. Now it was a reminder of everything humanity stood to lose. His fingers clenched the edge of the console in front of him, his jaw tight with frustration. Earth's military forces had been stretched to their limits, and reinforcements from allied worlds had failed to arrive, cut off by Vrex blockades. The worst part? No one had an answer for how to stop the Vrex. The doors behind him opened with a soft hiss, and Admiral Elena Morrow stepped in. Her uniform was disheveled, her face tired, but her expression was determined. "General, the situation's worse than we thought. The Vrex are advancing faster than our analysts predicted." Carter turned slowly, his face a mask of grim determination. "I know. We've lost 3 major colonies in the last week alone. If they get to Earth, they'll burn it to the ground." Elena finished his thought, stepping closer. "But I don't think that's all they want, Rain. The Vrex don't just destroy, they conquer. And if their invasion succeeds, they'll rule over humanity with terror." Carter nodded grimly. The Vrex were no ordinary invaders. Their leadership, the Tyrant, was a mysterious figure, intelligent, cold, and cruel. No one knew much about the Tyrant's origins, but Carter had heard rumors from scattered survivors that it was more than just a being. It was a force, an intelligence that manipulated entire civilizations into chaos before snuffing them out. Earth was no exception. A voice interrupted Carter's thoughts. "General Carter, urgent transmission from the Corran Empire," came from the communications officer. The words hit Carter like a punch to the gut. The Corrans. Their ancient rivalry with humanity had defined galactic politics for centuries. For years, the Corran Empire had been Earth's greatest adversary. Their militaristic society, advanced technology, and ruthless tactics made them an unforgiving foe. Many battles had been fought, each side gaining victories and inflicting losses in equal measure. Carter's heart sank. "Put them through," he ordered. The screen flickered to life, revealing the stoic face of Admiral Zura Valeric. Her cold, blue eyes locked onto the camera, exuding the same unyielding presence she had in every conflict Earth had faced against her people. "General Carter," she said, her voice calm but laced with urgency, "the Vrex are not just attacking. They are uniting the galaxy under their will. The Corran Empire has information, critical data that could turn the tide of this war." Carter's hand clenched into a fist. "I don't trust you, Valeric. You've been our enemy for too long." "And yet," she replied smoothly, "I offer you a chance to survive. Our fleets are preparing to intercept a major Vrex offensive. You have a choice: work with us, or let Earth fall like every other world the Vrex have ravaged." Carter's mind raced. The Corrans had technology humanity could never hope to match. If they could stop the Vrex, the war might just be winnable, but trusting them, even in a time of desperation, felt like a betrayal. Earth's pride was at stake. Still, as his gaze drifted back to the stars outside, the weight of their predicament settled upon him. The clock was ticking. Time was running out. "We'll discuss this further," Carter said, his voice clipped. "But know this, if this alliance fails, the Corrans will be the next enemy I fight." Valric's gaze never wavered. "Understood, General." But if you refuse, there will be nothing left to fight for." The transmission cut off, leaving Carter in silence. Behind him, Alina spoke softly. "We don't have time for pride, Rain. If the Corns are offering help, we should take it." Carter turned to face her, his expression hardening. "I know, but the cost of that help could destroy us in ways the Vrex never could." As he stared back out into the void, Earth's fate hung in the balance. Would humanity take this desperate chance, or would the price of victory be too high to bear? The Corran Empire had chosen the time and place for the summit with precision. A massive space station, known as the Nexus, stood at the edge of neutral territory, far from the reach of Rex warships, but close enough to remind Earth's leaders of the Corran presence. The station was a fortress of steel and sleek architecture, its walls adorned with the symbols of the Corran Empire, a race known for both their technological prowess and their brutal approach to diplomacy. General Rain Carter stood in the observation room of the Nexus, looking out at the star-speckled expanse. The Corrans had already arrived in full force, their warships forming a barrier around the station. A tense silence had settled over the Earth delegation as they waited for the meeting to begin. "General Carter," Admiral Alina Morrow said, her voice tight with anxiety, "I don't like this. This isn't just a summit, it's a show of power. They're going to demand more than we can give." Carter didn't respond immediately. He wasn't sure what his own instincts were telling him: trust the Corrans or prepare for betrayal. They were his people's greatest rival, and yet, in this moment, they were humanity's only potential ally. His mind kept drifting back to the transmission with Admiral Zura Valeric. Her icy composure, her words laced with threats wrapped in polished diplomacy. Carter couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a meeting about strategy. There were other motives at play. The door slid open, and a Corran envoy entered, flanked by 2 armed soldiers. The envoy was a tall, formidable figure, his eyes sharp and calculating. His voice, when he spoke, carried an air of authority that sent a chill through the room. "General Carter, Admiral Morrow, I trust your trip has been comfortable." "Comfortable enough," Carter replied curtly, his arms folded. "Let's get to the point. You said you had vital information about the Vrex. We don't have the luxury of time for pleasantries." The envoy gave a thin smile. "Of course, the Corran Empire understands urgency. Your fleet, however, will need more than just our knowledge. We'll need control of your strategic assets, your shipyards, your weapons research facilities. A full collaboration, if you will." Carter's eyes narrowed. He had been expecting a demand, but not this bold. "You're asking for more than a partnership. You're asking for submission. We've been allies before, but never like this." "We're not asking, General. We're offering you survival. Earth cannot fight the Vrex alone. Our forces are vast, our technology superior. We will stop the Vrex, but in return, you will allow us to oversee your defenses and share in your military resources. This is the price of our help." Carter's fingers flexed, tension building in his jaw. This wasn't just about fighting the Vrex anymore. This was a power play, and every instinct he had told him that the Corrans were testing their leverage, seeing how much they could take before Earth broke. He glanced at Admiral Morrow, who was visibly tense, but trying to remain composed. "What's to stop you from taking everything once the Vrex are gone?" Morrow asked, her voice sharp. "You'll have access to Earth's most vital infrastructure. You'll control us." Valric's envoy remained unfazed, his face a mask of indifference. "We will honor our agreement. The Corran Empire is a people of their word. We are not like the Vrex, but make no mistake, if you reject our offer, your world will fall. This is your final opportunity, General." The silence in the room was thick, the weight of the decision pressing down on everyone. Carter looked out the window again, staring into the abyss of space as the faint outline of Corran ships moved like shadows in the distance. Earth's defenses were faltering. The Vrex were closing in. The cost of refusal was catastrophic. He exhaled sharply and turned back to face the envoy. "We'll cooperate," Carter said, his voice carrying the weight of reluctant acceptance. "But the moment this alliance becomes an excuse for Corran domination, we will fight back. Don't think we won't." The envoy nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "That is acceptable, General. We shall begin preparations immediately." As the Corran delegation left the room, Carter felt a deep sense of unease settle over him. He had just made a pact with a species that had been his enemy for decades. He wasn't sure if the Corrans were offering help, or if they were simply biding their time to claim Earth for themselves. The summit had ended, but the real battle was only just beginning. The weeks following the summit were a blur of military meetings, tense negotiations, and strategic recalculations. The Corran Empire had wasted no time in establishing their presence on Earth, their warships hovering over key military installations, their officers overseeing the production of weapons and ships. General Rain Carter watched with a growing sense of unease as humanity's autonomy seemed to slip through his fingers. Despite the uneasy truce, there were those who resisted. Protests erupted in the streets of major cities, with anti-Corran sentiments running high. People remembered the long years of conflict, the countless lives lost in skirmishes and full-scale wars with the Corrans. The alliance with the Corrans felt like a betrayal to many, and some factions within Earth's government were calling for a return to isolation, believing that humanity could still fight the Vrex alone. But Carter knew better. He had seen the Vrex destroy entire civilizations in the blink of an eye. Earth had no choice but to cooperate, no matter how much it hurt their pride. Standing in the command center, Carter scanned the updated intelligence reports. Earth's fleet was barely holding its ground, and every day the Vrex expanded their reach. New reports came in about their tactics. They didn't just invade, they systematically crippled entire star systems, turning once thriving colonies into lifeless husks. The Corrans had insisted that they could provide the critical support humanity needed, but Carter still felt the sting of their demands. They had asked for too much, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were using the Vrex as a convenient excuse to solidify their control over Earth. "General, we've received word from the Corran military liaison," Admiral Elena Morrow said, stepping into the room. "They want to accelerate their operations. They believe the Vrex are on the verge of attacking a major stronghold, our last line of defense." Carter turned to her, his eyes hard. "I don't care what they want. If they try to move faster than we can handle, we'll have a problem. We don't have much of a choice. The Vrex are moving toward the Rigel system, and if they capture that, Earth's orbital defenses will be compromised." Carter's jaw tightened. The Rigel system was critical. If the Vrex took it, they would have access to Earth's heart, its most vulnerable point. The Corrans had offered their fleets, but the price, Earth's strategic dominance, was too high. The idea of surrendering Earth's military infrastructure to the Corrans was repugnant to him, but time was running out. His gaze drifted to the holographic display, where the Rigel system appeared as a cluster of red dots, signaling the Vrex advance. "How soon do we need to deploy?" he asked, turning to Morrow. "Within the next 24 hours. The Corrans want our fleet to integrate with theirs immediately." Carter clenched his fists. The very thought of coordinating Earth's forces with the Corran Empire's was distasteful, but it was a risk he might have to take. "Prepare the fleet. We'll meet them halfway." Elena's face was tight with worry, but she nodded. "Understood." Later that evening, as Carter stood alone in his quarters, he couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in his gut. The Corrans had been careful with their promises, too careful. Every step forward was balanced with a new condition, and Carter could feel the pressure mounting. If they succeeded in driving the Vrex back, humanity would be saved. But if the Corrans were simply using the situation as a way to gain a stronger foothold in Earth's government, everything humanity had fought for would be lost. He turned to the small holotable in his quarters, bringing up the intelligence reports on the Vrex's movements. The data was grim. They were adapting too quickly. It wasn't just their firepower or their strategic genius that made them so deadly, it was their unpredictability. Earth's military analysts had been unable to figure out how the Vrex operated on a deeper level. The Corans had their own theories, but Carter wasn't sure he trusted them. As the night dragged on, Carter knew that a decision had to be made. The alliance with the Corans could mean the difference between survival and extinction. But at what cost? Could humanity afford to trust its greatest enemy, or was it simply trading one form of oppression for another? The question lingered as the first light of dawn broke over the Earth's surface. Time was running out. There was no turning back now. Tomorrow, they would face the Vrex, and Carter knew, deep down, that the true cost of this alliance was still to be revealed. The Rigel system was a nerve-wracking sight. On the holoprojector, the blue and green orbits of planets stood in stark contrast to the growing red cloud of Vrex warships converging in the system's outer rim. General Carter had never faced an enemy like this before. The Vrex's unpredictable tactics had already thrown Earth's forces into disarray, and now, with the Coran Empire's fleets pulling into position alongside them, tensions were at an all-time high. Carter leaned over the command center's railing, his eyes scanning the battle plans displayed on the holographic screens. The Corans had insisted on their military's leadership in this operation, and their ships, though formidable, were unlike anything Earth's forces had ever worked alongside. There was an air of arrogance in their strategy, as if the Corans saw this as just another victory to add to their empire's history. General, Morrow's voice pulled Carter from his thoughts. The Coran fleet is ready for deployment. They're pushing for immediate action. Carter gritted his teeth. We don't move until we have complete control over our forces. I'm not having their ships barking orders at us in the middle of a battlefield. Morrow nodded in agreement, though the unease in her expression was hard to miss. You know that if we don't act fast, the Vrex will reach Rigel Ivy before we can deploy our full strength. I know, Carter replied, his voice low. His mind raced with the grim possibilities. They had no choice but to rely on the Corans, whether they liked it or not. But Carter's suspicion of their motives still festered like an open wound. The Corans hadn't been forthcoming about their true intentions. Were they really allies, or just conquerors waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The tension between Earth's commanders and their Coran counterparts was palpable. The Corans were insisting that their advanced technology was the only thing that could ensure Earth's survival, but Earth's officers were less than thrilled to surrender any measure of control. For all the talk of cooperation, there were still too many differences in tactics, culture, and leadership styles for anything resembling true unity. The orders came swiftly, and the fleets began to move. As Earth's warships formed up alongside the Coran fleet, Carter couldn't help but feel a surge of dread. The vast Coran ships, their sleek, angular forms almost gliding through space, were a stark contrast to Earth's more rugged, bulky vessels. The differences were more than just aesthetic. The Corans operated with an efficiency and speed that Earth had never fully mastered. Yet there was something cold and calculating about their movements, like the precision of a predator stalking its prey. Admiral Morrow came up beside him, her face tense. The Vrex haven't made their move yet. It's too quiet. Not for long, Carter muttered, his gaze still locked on the approaching Vrex formations. They're waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They always do. The hours stretched on as Earth's fleet, now partially integrated with the Coran forces, prepared for battle. Carter couldn't shake the feeling that every decision, every order, was leading them closer to a confrontation they weren't prepared for. Every move the Corans made seemed too rehearsed, too controlled, and that cold, calculating edge to their tactics made him question whether they were truly fighting for Earth's survival or for something more. As the first Vrex warship broke through the outer rim of the system, Carter's hand clenched into a fist. This was it, the moment they had been dreading. The Vrex had arrived, their ships massive and brutal, unlike anything the Corans had ever encountered. Carter turned to Morrow. "Get the fleet into formation. We can't afford to let the Vrex take the initiative." Morrow's eyes locked onto his with a quiet understanding. "Understood, General. We move now." The battle had begun. Space erupted into chaos as laser fire and missiles lit up the dark void, tracing bright lines through the stars. Earth's ships, though vastly outnumbered, held their ground, their crews working with precision and determination. The Corans, for all their technology, fought with an arrogance that irked Carter, their ships striking with overwhelming force, but lacking the instinctive brutality of Earth's warriors. As the battle raged, Carter's mind flashed back to the summit. The Corans had offered their help in exchange for control, but it was now more apparent than ever that they hadn't been entirely honest. Their forces were superior in some ways, but the true cost of this alliance, the price humanity would pay for survival, was becoming more and more unclear. The Vrex were relentless, their warships moving with calculated ferocity. They had no care for honor, no hesitation to sacrifice anything in their path to victory. It was that lack of morality that made them such a dangerous foe. And yet, as Carter watched the battle unfold before him, he realized something chilling. The Vrex may have underestimated humanity's resolve, but the Corans had not. And Earth was stuck between two predators, each with their own designs on power. The real question was, who would betray them first? The battle raged for hours, but the momentum was shifting. Earth's fleet had held firm, but the Corans were pushing harder than ever, their ships moving in synchronized waves, seemingly bent on proving their superiority. Carter watched the displays in silence, his mind working furiously. Earth's forces were giving everything they had, but the Vrex were relentless. For every ship Earth destroyed, two more seemed to take its place, and the Corans, despite their technological advantage, were starting to make mistakes. Carter's comm panel blinked to life. "General, we've detected a significant energy spike." Morrow's voice crackled through the transmission. "It's coming from the Coran flagship." Carter stiffened, a chill running down his spine. "What kind of spike?" "It's too concentrated for a normal weapon discharge," Morrow explained. "It looks like they're powering up something big." His mind raced. The Corans had kept their advanced technology a closely guarded secret, and if they were planning something catastrophic, it was no coincidence. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about defeating the Vrex. The Corans had their own agenda. The thought of it hit him like a punch to the gut. "Activate all long-range sensors," Carter ordered. "Let's see what they're hiding." As the sensors flickered to life, the image of the Coran flagship appeared on the display, a massive spiked structure surrounded by smaller vessels, all moving in tight formation. The energy readings coming from the flagship were off the charts, and Carter could see the flash of light that indicated an enormous weapon charging. Before he could issue another order, the Coran communications channel opened, and the voice of Commander Kale, the Coran fleet's leader, came through. "General Carter, prepare your forces. We are launching a decisive strike against the Vrex flagship. It will turn the tide in our favor." Carter's hand gripped the edge of the console. "I didn't agree to this," he said, his voice cold. "You agreed to work with us, not question our tactics," Kale replied smoothly, the underlying arrogance unmistakable. "This weapon will end the Vrex threat once and for all." Carter's mind spun. He had heard rumors, whispers of a superweapon, one so powerful it could annihilate entire fleets in a single strike. If the Corans were about to use it, there was no telling what would happen to the Vrex, or to Earth's forces caught in the crossfire. "Commander, pull back," Carter ordered, his voice tight. "We don't have a full understanding of the weapon's capabilities. If you launch it now, you risk everything." Cal's response was immediate. "You have no say in this matter, General. We made our agreement, and it's time to honor it." A surge of anger flooded Carter's chest. But before he could respond, a deafening roar of energy filled the command center. The flagship fired. The shot was blinding. A wave of blue-white light tore through the fabric of space, a beam of energy so concentrated it bent the very stars around it. The force of the blast ripped through the battlefield, obliterating everything in its path. Several Vrex warships were consumed by the blast, their hulking forms turning to ash in an instant. But the blast didn't stop there. It was heading directly toward Earth's fleet, a massive, unstoppable wave of destruction. Carter's heart skipped a beat. The Corrins hadn't just attacked the Vrex, they had launched an assault on Earth's own forces. "Commander Kale, what the hell have you done?" Carter shouted into the comm, his voice breaking through the static. Kale's voice was eerily calm. "You knew the risks, General. The price of victory is steep." As Carter watched in horror, the blast continued its deadly trajectory toward Earth's ships. The weapon was more powerful than anything he had ever seen, a force capable of decimating an entire fleet in seconds. His heart raced as he barked orders to evasive maneuvers, but there was no way to outrun this. "Get those ships out of the blast radius," Carter yelled, but the panic in his voice was palpable. He watched helplessly as the wave of destruction devoured the first few Earth vessels, turning them into shattered fragments of metal. The destruction was so total that there was no time to even register how many ships had been lost before they were reduced to nothing. Morrow's voice broke through the chaos, her tone shaking. "General, we've lost contact with half of the fleet. The Corrins—" "I know," Carter cut her off. It was deliberate. His mind was reeling. The Corrins hadn't just betrayed humanity. They had set the stage for something far worse. Carter knew that whatever Cal's true plan was, it involved not only securing their control over Earth, but ensuring that humanity would never have the power to fight back. "Admiral, we have to get out of here," Carter said, his voice sharp. "We're sitting ducks. If we don't pull back now, we'll lose everything." But as Carter's eyes locked onto the remaining Corrin ships, one thing was clear. Earth was no longer their ally in this war. They were a pawn, and the Corrins had made their first move in a game they had no intention of losing. The Corrin betrayal hit Earth's fleet like a tidal wave. The initial blast from the flagship had torn through their forces with brutal efficiency, leaving nothing but floating wreckage in its wake. Carter could feel the weight of the loss in his chest, ships lost, crews gone, and the silence that followed the destruction was deafening. The cold void of space suddenly felt suffocating, the hum of the command center eerily quiet, save for the steady beeping of damaged consoles. "We've lost half the fleet, General," Morrow reported, her voice barely a whisper. "The Corrins, they've crippled us." Carter's fists clenched. The initial wave of disbelief had worn off, and now only rage remained. He had seen the cold calculation in Kale's eyes, heard the arrogance in his voice. The Corrins were playing a long game, and humanity had been nothing more than a tool in their plan. But there was no time to dwell on the past. There was still a battle to fight, and a war to win. Carter stared at the remaining ships of Earth's fleet scattered across the Rigel system. They were battered, but they were not yet broken. "We need to regroup," Carter said, his voice hard with determination. "Pull the remaining ships back to the outer edge of the system. If we fight here, we're finished." Morrow hesitated for a moment. "And the Corrins? We can't afford to waste time with them," Carter said, his eyes narrowing. "We need to warn Earth, rally the rest of the fleet. If we don't act fast, Kale will have all of humanity under his control." As the surviving ships slowly retreated, Carter's mind churned with strategies, none of them ideal. The Corrins had revealed their true nature, manipulative, ruthless, and driven by their own goals. They were no longer allies, they were enemies, and their betrayal had irrevocably altered the course of this war. On the command deck, Carter's eyes flicked to a display showing the positions of the remaining Vrex ships. They were regrouping, but they were far from defeated. The battle was not over yet. Earth's forces had suffered, but they had the resolve to keep fighting. The Vrex might have underestimated them, but the Corans had made a grave mistake in thinking they could control humanity. "Admiral, we have to hit the Vrex before they have time to regroup," Carter said. "We need a diversion, something big. The Corans might have their super weapons, but they're not invincible." Morrow gave a curt nod, quickly relaying the order. "I'll coordinate with the remaining commanders. We'll hit the Vrex on 2 fronts." But as the fleet began to reorganize, the question that lingered in Carter's mind was whether they were strong enough to fight 2 enemies at once. The Corans had betrayed them, but the Vrex were relentless, savages bent on conquest, and their vicious tactics could not be ignored. Carter stood at the center of the command deck, his mind calculating the risks. If they attacked the Vrex first, would the Corans take advantage of the chaos to launch another strike? If they focused on the Corans, would the Vrex overrun their weakened defenses? A voice broke through his thoughts. It was Morrow, her face grim. "General, the Coran fleet is pulling back. They're forming a perimeter around the Rigel system. They're not retreating. They are preparing for something." Carter's eyes widened. "Preparing for what?" "Unknown," Morrow replied. "But they've reinforced their position, and the energy readings from their flagship are spiking again." "Damn it," Carter muttered. The Corans weren't done. They had something else planned, and it didn't involve Earth's survival. They were playing their game, and humanity was simply another piece on the board. The harsh truth hit Carter like a punch in the gut. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and stuck between 2 dangerous enemies. Earth's fleet had no choice but to fight, to survive, and to take the fight to the Corans and the Vrex. But Carter knew something else too. The Corans' betrayal had changed everything. Humanity's future didn't just depend on defeating the Vrex. It now depended on freeing itself from the Coran stranglehold, and that would require a drastic move. "We need to go on the offensive," Carter said, his voice resolute. "We can't wait any longer. The Corans may have struck first, but Earth will have the last word." Morrow's gaze sharpened. "You're not suggesting—" "Yes," Carter interrupted. "We take the fight to their flagship. We'll destroy their weapon systems, take their fleet out of the equation, and then we finish the Vrex." The idea was reckless, but it was the only move left. The Corans had shown their cards, and now Earth had to do whatever it took to survive. It would be a battle on 2 fronts, and every decision would carry massive risks. But for the first time since the battle began, Carter felt a surge of hope. Humanity's strength didn't lie in numbers or advanced technology. It was in their determination, their refusal to give up, even when it seemed impossible. He turned to Morrow, his voice firm. "Prepare the fleet. We're going to the heart of the Coran forces. If we're going to win this war, we have to take them down now." With that, Earth's forces began to rally, ready for their final stand. The Corans might have betrayed them, but humanity would not go quietly into the night. This was only the beginning of the war for Earth's survival, and Carter would lead them all the way to the end. Carter stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the vast expanse of space outside the viewport. The Coran flagship loomed on the horizon like an impenetrable fortress, surrounded by a web of smaller ships, each one deadly in its own right. Earth's fleet had regrouped, but they were still outnumbered, and time was running out. The Corans knew they were coming. They had to make their move now, before the enemy could react. "General, we've finished the calculations," Morrow reported, her voice steady but laced with tension. "We've got one shot at this. If we don't break through their defenses, we'll be sitting ducks." Carter nodded, his jaw set with grim resolve. The plan was reckless, a final gamble, but it was the only option they had. The Corans had already shown their willingness to sacrifice everything for their own agenda. Earth's survival depended on this assault, and if they failed, well, he wouldn't allow failure to be an option. He turned to Morrow, locking eyes. "Ready the fleet. We're going in fast, no hesitation. We'll take out their weapon systems, then hit their core, make sure every ship is ready for a full assault. Understood, Morrow said, her voice tight as she relayed the orders to the fleet. The tension in the command room was palpable. Every officer, every soldier knew the stakes. They were risking everything on this one strike. As the fleet moved into position, Carter's thoughts raced. The Corrans were cunning, ruthless, but they were also proud. Their flagship, the Vrex's last shadow, was their symbol of power. If they could bring it down, they would strike at the heart of their enemy's morale. But the flagship was heavily fortified, and even with Earth's best remaining forces, there was no guarantee of success. Morrow, any updates on the Corran flagship's energy readings? Carter asked, his voice low. Still spiking, Morrow replied. But there's a pattern. They're charging their super weapon again. It's ready to fire. A chill ran down Carter's spine. If the Corrans unleashed that weapon now, there would be nothing left of Earth's fleet. He knew the risk. But he also knew that if they didn't strike first, the cost would be far higher. Set course for their weapons array, Carter ordered, his voice steady despite the rising tension. We hit them hard, and we hit them fast. Everyone, focus on the enemy's weak points. We don't have time for finesse. The fleet surged forward, weapons primed and shields raised. Earth's ships, battered but still capable of one last push, moved with precision, their trajectory calculated to punch through the Corran defenses in a single coordinated strike. Carter's heart beat in time with the countdown on the screen as they closed in on the flagship. The Corran fleet responded with brutal efficiency. Ships scattered, launching a barrage of energy weapons that tore through space, closing the gap between the two forces. Carter watched the enemy ships move into position, their firing patterns becoming predictable. It was a desperate final stand on both sides. Firing range in 30 seconds. Morrow called out, her voice rising with urgency. Brace for impact. Carter gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles white. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, the weight of every life on his shoulders. If they didn't succeed, Earth's fate would be sealed. But there was no turning back now. 5 seconds to impact. Morrow counted down, the tension unbearable. All ships, prepare to fire. The world seemed to slow as Carter's eyes locked on the Corran flagship. Every detail was burned into his mind. The sleek, terrifying design of the ship, the overwhelming firepower it contained, and the darkness of space surrounding it. This was it. They were moments away from either victory or annihilation. Fire! In that instant, Earth's fleet unleashed everything they had. The ships released a torrent of energy blasts, cutting through the void with precision. The Corran ships retaliated, but Earth's fleet had the element of surprise on their side. The first wave of firepower struck the Corran flagship's defenses, rippling across the shields before breaking through. Carter's breath caught in his throat. It's working. But the Corrans weren't done yet. The flagship's superweapon charged, and Carter saw the deadly glow beginning to form in its core. Morrow, they're going to fire, he shouted. We have to stop them before it's too late. The seconds felt like hours as the energy beam from the flagship began to pulse, its destructive power poised to annihilate everything in its path. Earth's ships continued to press forward, but they were too close to avoid the blast if it fired. Carter's mind raced. He had one chance to stop this. The Corrans had underestimated humanity's resolve. Reroute all power to the main cannon, Carter ordered, slamming his fist against the console. We need to hit them before they fire. The command was relayed in an instant, and Earth's flagship, Defender of Hope, fired its main cannon, a concentrated burst of energy aimed directly at the heart of the Corran superweapon. The two forces collided in a burst of light. The flagship's massive weapon flared as it fired, but Earth's strike reached its target first, breaking through the Corran flagship's shield and damaging the superweapon. The energy beam sputtered out, and for a moment, everything seemed frozen in time. Carter's heart raced as he waited for the dust to settle, knowing that whatever happened next would determine the future of humanity. The battle hung in the balance, the silence of space pierced by the aftermath of the explosion. Carter's breath was shallow as he stared at the fading shockwaves from the Corran flagship. His fingers gripped the console as he waited for the dust to settle. The energy beam from the Corran superweapon had fizzled out, but the flagship wasn't finished yet. "We've breached their defenses," Morrow's voice crackled through the intercom. "Their shields are down, but they're regrouping. We still have a window to finish this." Carter's eyes narrowed. The Corrans were resilient, but Earth's fleet had one advantage: their tenacity. Humanity had fought for survival for so long. They knew how to endure even when all seemed lost. "Status on our fleet?" Carter asked, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We've lost several ships," Mara replied, her voice tight. "But we still have enough firepower to make this work. The Vrex are retreating. Seems like they're not willing to risk facing us head-on after the Corran superweapon failed." "Good," Carter muttered, feeling the weight of the situation. The Vrex were vicious, but they were also self-serving. If the Corrans were no longer a threat, the Vrex would likely scatter to save themselves. But the Corrans were a different matter. They would fight to the bitter end. "Prepare for another assault," Carter ordered. "We take them down now, or we don't get another chance." As the fleet reoriented and began its final charge toward the Corran flagship, Carter could feel the intensity of the moment. His body tensed with anticipation, every nerve on edge. The Corrans had come so close to wiping out humanity, and now, in this final confrontation, Carter's mind sharpened to a point. Victory was within reach, but they had to press on. Targeting their engine core, Mara announced, her fingers flying across the console as she input the final coordinates. "We've pinpointed the exact weak spot in their hull. If we hit it, we can take the flagship down." "Fire everything we've got," Carter commanded, standing tall as the fleet closed in. The ships moved in unison, their cannons unleashing a torrent of firepower. Earth's fleet poured every remaining resource into the strike. No more hesitation, no more second chances. The first blast hit the Corran flagship's engine core, and the ship shuddered violently, but the flagship didn't crumble as Carter had hoped. Instead, the Corrans seemed to be reinforcing their defenses. "They've activated emergency shields," Mara reported urgently. "It's blocking our shots." Carter gritted his teeth. "We need to get closer. Fire at will, all ships. Focus on their shield generators." The fleet surged forward once again, their weapons cutting through space like a storm. The Corran flagship retaliated, launching retaliatory fire, but Earth's ships were too quick, too agile now, having adapted to the enemy's tactics. The flagship's emergency shields flickered under the constant barrage, and it was only a matter of time before they failed. Carter watched as the shield generators on the flagship began to flicker and die. His eyes widened with anticipation. "This is it," he muttered. "One more push, and we'll end this." In the chaos of the final assault, Carter's mind was focused entirely on the task at hand. The fate of Earth, of humanity, rested on this moment. They couldn't afford to be merciful. The Corrans had betrayed them, had forced humanity to the brink of extinction, and now they would pay the price. "General," Morrow shouted, snapping him from his thoughts. "We've got a lock on their engine core again. This is our last chance." "Do it," Carter ordered. The ships fired once more, the concentrated energy from every remaining vessel hammering the Corran flagship. The flagship's core, already weakened by previous hits, couldn't withstand the relentless assault. A massive explosion erupted from the center of the Corran ship. The shockwave rippled across the fleet, rocking Earth's ships, but Carter held his ground. He didn't flinch. The flagship's massive form began to crumble, disintegrating under the sheer force of the energy blasts. The Corrans were done. Their once mighty flagship was reduced to nothing more than debris floating in the void. Direct hit, Morrow said, a note of triumph in her voice. We did it. The flagship is destroyed. Carter's heart pounded, but a sense of relief washed over him. It wasn't over. There would still be cleanup and consequences to face, but this was the turning point. The Corrins had been broken. He stood silent for a moment, watching the remnants of the Corrin fleet scattered across the stars. The Vrex had already begun retreating, realizing the battle was lost. Earth's victory was not without cost, but it was a victory nonetheless. We've won, Morrow said softly, almost disbelieving. Carter nodded, his expression somber. We've survived. That's all that matters. We're not done yet, but this is our chance to rebuild. The loss of so many lives still weighed heavy on Carter's heart. But humanity had proven its worth. They had faced betrayal, insurmountable odds, and the crushing weight of uncertainty, and they had come out victorious. The silence of space once again filled the command room, but this time it wasn't filled with tension or dread. It was the silence of a new beginning. Set course for Earth, Carter ordered. We have a lot of work to do. The fleet turned home, knowing they had not just survived, they had ensured the future of humanity.